First and foremost, I'm just thankful to see all of you first thing in the morning. Probably a lot of you start earlier than this, so you probably got a chance to sleep in a little bit. But as Dan said, I'm Darrell Rounds, and I currently work for General Motors within our safety organization. And primarily, my role entails managing construction safety and what we call design-in safety, which equates to working with our manufacturing teams to mitigate risks and hazards associated with our assembly processes. So now you're wondering, like, why is this guy talking about EV charging? Well, prior to this role, I spent 25 years in the facilities management space at General Motors, and one of my last roles within facilities was the EV infrastructure strategy lead for North America. That position was so short-lived that I debate whether or not I should put it on my resume, but I think somebody saw it on my resume. And if you signed up for this class initially, you probably thought you were coming to a panel. And when I was asked, I thought I was too, but I'm the panel. So I pray and hope that what we're going to share with you today will be helpful and beneficial to you as you evolve in your EV journey. Is that okay? All right. All right, so you're probably going to see the slide one more time, but in a different form. But the learning objectives, what you signed up for, is to understand the financial and operational implications of adding EVSE to your facilities, current EVSE and compatible renewable technologies, opportunities to design and fund an effective EVSE network, how to work with your utility to plan for EVSE upgrades. That sound about right of what you signed up to learn about today? Okay, I'm looking for head nods and I see them. All right. So I want to just do a quick census of like who do we have here. So if you're a facilities manager or a property manager, raise your hand. That's the majority of the room, all right? If you're like a senior manager, director, an executive, leader within your organization, raise your hand. Okay, I might be looking for you afterwards, cause I want to shoot you my resume. No, I'm just kidding. Any techs or operators, technicians and operators? Yeah, you do it all. Okay, all right, all right. And then any concerned others? Others. All right. So is that like all of the above, or is that something different? Engineer? Okay, all right. Say it again, ma'am. Parking? Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So you're an owner, like you all that. Good. All right. So, okay, cool. So if I build it, will they come? So some of you might know this picture. It comes from a movie called Field of Dreams, and basically the lead character was tasked from this mysterious voice to build this field, and one of the taglines was that if he built it, will they come? So I confess, I work for General Motors. I'm assigned a vehicle, and when you talk about, sustainability and going to electric vehicles, I'm on the far other side of the spectrum because they assigned me a Chevrolet Tahoe with a 6.6 liter Duramax diesel engine. It's like, it's a sweet ride, but it's totally diametrically opposed to the direction that we're going in EV. And, I had another session yesterday, and I'm all about shameless plugs, right? So, I'm not trying to sell you a car, but if you just kind of want a car, you can come and talk to me. But General Motors is invested in an all EV future. Um, by 2030, we're looking at an all EV future. Now, what does that really look like, and like how do we get there? And one of the issues as a property manager or facility manager is that there's big buzz around EV, but does it really make sense for me to invest all of this money and capital and resources to put these chargers in if we really don't know what the future is going to look like, or even if the people that work within our organizations are even driving EVs, like this guy who happens to drive a 6.6 liter diesel. So again, in getting to that end, the learning objectives really tie into that, because you really have to understand the financial and operational implications of adding EVSE to your facilities, those current and compatible technologies, what opportunities exist to fund and design a sustainable EVSE network, and then even working with your utility to plan for upgrades as they come. All right? So here's some other questions to consider. Does it really make sense for me to install chargers at my facility? What's the cost impact? Can my current infrastructure handle it? Again, if I build it, will they come? And what does operations and maintenance look like for these units? So in my one of my previous roles as an EV infrastructure lead, one of the things that we had to decide on is the amount of investment that we were going to put into all of our plants. Like, we have about, just call it 40 plants across North America. For the most part, the employees that work in those plants are UAW employees in Canada. We have Unifor, so they're union employees, so there are rules. But everything is done jointly, right? So even parking, so we have to consider, what's the right mix of parking. But one of the things that we did was we surveyed the entire population, and if you have 80,000, you might get a 5 or 6% sampling rate, but some data is better than no data, so that you can make a decision. But at the end of the day, you really have to understand what the feasibility is. And if you put all of these chargers in, are individuals actually going to use them? So again, we surveyed them, and then we found in a lot of cases that in some areas there was a greater adoption rate for electric vehicles, but in some areas the adoption rate for EV was slim. So we had to make decisions as opposed to taking a peanut butter approach across our portfolio. And I would encourage you to do the same, to really understand what the need and what the demand is for electric vehicles. And then again, that ties in operations and maintenance. More assets you have, more maintenance you have to plan for and to execute. So we've been dropping, does everybody know what EVSE? I don't want to automatically assume, because like in our space, in the FM space, we hear a lot of acronyms and abbreviations, so I didn't want to automatically assume. We were in a session yesterday, and we were dropping CMMS and IWMS and CAFM, and you're probably looking at me like, well, what is he talking about? But don't want to automatically assume that everybody knows what EVSE is. So EVSE stands for Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment, but more commonly known as electric vehicle charging stations, the chargers. All right, so when you see EVSE, they're talking about chargers, right? So NEMA, or the National Electronics Manufacturers Association, defines those as devices that provide electric power to the vehicle and use that to recharge the vehicle's batteries. You know, the EVSC systems include the conductors, the related equipment, the software, and all of the communications protocols that deliver energy efficiently and safely to the vehicle. And you have three main parts, which include the software that's included in the communications protocols that make everything run, the actual enclosure of the charging station, that's the box that you see when you walk up, and then the plug itself. All right? It's clear? A lot of you guys looking at me like you already knew that, but it's okay. So you have, for all practical purposes, three primary levels of EV charging. So level one, you use AC to deliver power using common household electricity standards. You have low power loads and relatively longer EV charging times. And you'll usually see those in residences and in some workplaces. Level two are probably some of the most adopted, and they use AC to deliver power using a specialized connection of higher voltage. Some can use 120, some can use 208. These deliver power between 6.6 kilowatts and 19 kilowatts of power. And you have slightly less charging times, but some EV models have an onboard limitation that restricts charging to roughly half that rate in order to manage temperature and optimize battery life. So some cars can't be charged too quickly. And then you have DC fast charging, which uses DC power to provide high power levels. And usually those are seen when you have fleets of vehicles, where you have manufacturers that are manufacturing EV in the process. They utilize specialized charging equipment. One thing about DC fast charging is the fact that not all vehicles can or should be fast charged. Some vehicles lack the proper connectors, and the high power level of these chargers can reduce the lifetime of some EV batteries. So demands for EV charging vary by location, and they influence your equipment choices. So for homes or residences, you'll probably see level 1 or level 2 chargers, and usually the one that's driving the EV is the same one that owns the charger. Some of the benefits around that is the fact that the electricity is inexpensive and it's convenient, but some of the drawbacks include that it's not available in all housing situations, and if you're taking long journeys, it's not viable because of how that charging curve works. In the workplace, you'll see some level 1s, but for the most part today you see level 2 chargers. Usually the one that's driving the EV is different than the one that owns the charger, so a lot of employers provide charging stations for their employees. Some of the benefits include predictable charging needs and can save costs if behind the same meter as the workplace. But some of the drawbacks include the workplace needs to make an investment decision, and the convenience is during working hours only. For the public, right, you have all three different types of chargers. Again, the EV user or the EV car owner is different than those that own the chargers. And these are some of the ones that you see in the rest areas as you're driving down the freeway. They meet the charging needs for vacations, leisure activities, and EV users without other charging access. The charging cost to the driver of the vehicle can be relatively higher than other charging location, and it's a less predictable demand, because one day, like you might have a mass of people driving to their favorite destination, and then you might have a blizzard that restricts travel. And then you know, if there's a fleet of vehicles, right? Level 2 and DCFC chargers, the owner of the charger is usually the organizational employer, and they own the vehicles. The benefits include predictable charging needs. There's a high potential of efficient electrification and fleet fuel cost savings. Some of the drawbacks, though, in order to install these chargers, there's a high upfront cost, and then it requires extensive planning. So, does anybody have level 2 and DC chargers in their charging portfolio? All right. So, when you first embarked upon that journey, did you get sticker shock at the difference between level 2 chargers and the DC fast chargers? I hear some head, because like when I saw it, I was like, whoa. You know, we could install, let's just say, a level 2 charger all in for like $1,000. I'll just throw that number out. Like when you talk about scale, DC fast chargers, when you install them, 10x, like 10,000. And I see some people nodding in agreement. So as you plan for your workplace, you know, you don't want to give those employees that are coming to work every day the capability to charge using DC fast chargers, because, you know, they're going to be at work and they can use level 2 chargers and leverage the time that they're at work in order to charge their vehicles. And it's just a numbers game at that point. Does that make sense? All right.
So what's the L2 charger? Is that AC?
Yeah, it's AC. So let me go back. So level 2 chargers use AC to deliver power using a specialized connection of higher voltage. So you can do 120 or usually 208. 208. Yeah. All right, any other questions? Yes, ma'am. I think that might have been misstated. Yeah. For the most part, at an employer, if you see chargers that are like in the parking lot, so to speak, in an employee parking lot, for the most part, those are going to be level 2 chargers. Yeah. And I think there's just like maybe a small portion of vehicles that aren't compatible yet. And I apologize, that might have been a dated statement. But for the most part, if you go to like our parking lots at work, you'll see a bank of chargers, and they're level 2 chargers. But then if you go behind the gate where we're testing vehicles, you're going to see a slew of DC fast chargers. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, sir.
The 10K you're talking about, that's just for equipment, that's not infrastructure. So
I'm trying to recall, because that was a couple of jobs ago. No, that's equipment plus installation, like contractor costs. And I'm just trying to give you some scale, right? Like it's about 10 times the amount. It's 10 times the amount of cost to install a DC fast charger than it is to install level 2. So we had to play the numbers game, right? So you have a project and you only have so many funds, and then you have to make a decision as to, all right, like how many level 2 chargers are you going to give this site, and how many DC fast chargers are you going to give this site? And then some, how can I say it? Some organizational team members, you know, they love the thought of having DC fast charging on their site. And I'm like, okay, you only have so much money. So like if I give you 2 DC fast chargers, 20,000, that's using the math that I just gave you, that's 20 chargers that's 20 level 2 chargers that I can't install somewhere else. So you have to work really closely with your organizations to really understand what the need is. But for the most part, when we're talking about, again, level 2, you're really talking about employee workplace charging. DC fast chargers are behind the scenes, like for your fleet and for if you're in that business of manufacturing vehicles or whatever. Go ahead, sir. Things that I'm going to allude to, there's no sets. There's many like standards, and it's not centralized. It's decentralized. But when it comes to manufacturers, because the adoption rate is increasing, a lot of manufacturers have done a good job of working with their customers in helping them understand what the requirements are for charging at their home. Most charger, that's what I forgot to ask. Are there any charging manufacturers in the room? All right. So I'm gonna look at you as my lawyer for the rest of to make sure that I'm not out of pocket. But a lot of vehicle manufacturers, I know on one of my former teams, there was a gentleman who was responsible for the EV charging, the workplace EV charging program for our sites, but then also on the sales and dealer side, because of his expertise, he got roped in to help interface with the customer, and he actually even had to go like early on in the process, he had to actually go out to customers' homes and help them understand what the requirements that they need. So a lot of manufacturers, I know General Motors is one of them, a shameless plug. We do a really good job of working with customers so that they understand the requirements. But, there's some instances where there might not be some compatibility. For the most part, if you have like an EV and you pull up to a charging location, you should be able to plug and play. Okay. All right, somebody had their hand up here. So I was trying to wait until the end for questions and answers, but this is great. You guys are helping me out at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. So, where are we? So, does it make sense to install chargers at my facility? So, adding chargers to a facility have both financial and operational implications depending on several factors such as the number of chargers to be installed, the types of chargers, the location of the facility, and the current demand for EV charging in the area. So that goes back to my whole survey question, right? If you're installing chargers for for your employer to provide this charging capability for the employees, are they driving EVs? And then do you have if you're doing it for a municipality, it's just good social responsibility to be able to provide that in the spirit of overall sustainability. So here's some financial implications. We touched on it a little bit, installation costs. So installing chargers can involve upfront costs for purchasing and install it in charging stations, wiring, and other related equipment. The costs can vary depending on the number of chargers required and the type of charging equipment chosen. So it goes back to DC fast is significantly higher than level 2s, right? Just as an example. Electricity costs. So chargers consume electricity to charge electric vehicles, and this cost may need to be factored in, especially if the facility owner is responsible for covering the electricity bills, right? So, one of the things that we had to factor in is not only our infrastructure, but like how is this going to affect, our utility costs? And in the grand scheme of things, not significant, but as time goes on, it could create a spike. So just keep that in mind, especially if you're a smaller organization, of how that can affect your utility costs. And then revenue generation, depending upon the pricing strategy chosen, chargers can generate revenue for the facility owner. This revenue can be in the form of charging fees or leasing fees for the charging station space. So by show of hands, who's all installed chargers in here for their organization? Do you all charge your people to use them?
That was my staff.
Well, I know that for workplace charging, we didn't charge our people like anything. And we had the same I won't call it the same problem, but it's a issue, maybe challenge, where you would have people charging, like just sitting there all day, and then you would have the occasional person that didn't work at the company come in and try to charge their vehicle. So there was a little bit more vigilance that we had to take around. But for the most part, you really can't even control for that. So let me just pose the question to the room. Has anybody that provides charging for an organization or for their workplace, have you guys charged your people? All right. Well, okay. Okay. Right.
The cost of the installation and the infrastructure, we pass through the cost of the electricity, so we're just charging the electricity cost.
Okay. So I'm curious now. So like, what does that look like? I mean, do I have to I got a card that I load and?
Yeah, we have cell phone dials, since we have through the fences throughout the building. Well, there's an app also. Yeah, it's an app-based way to dial it out. So, but if you don't do a cell phone dial, then you gotta bring Ethernet to it and connect it to the net. So that's how it works.
Okay. I see you. I was looking for you.
So that's how we do ours too. We're a healthcare provider. Okay. We're a hospital. So anybody coming into our facility has to pay a part anyway. So we have, portions for staff and portions for visitors. We went to a company to actually provide these stations, which we were letting them get for free. Now the company is in charge of, the fees, and now we get a revenue from that company for using their TV stations. So it kind of makes it easier for us to get that revenue and not, held liable for the charging station.
Okay.
I don't want to jump in on what you're doing, but
Jump in.
Yeah.
Hey, so time out. So I told you guys that originally that this was. So thanks for being a part of our panel. No, I really appreciate it. Go ahead, sir.
it's kind of all based on what you want. A lot of workplaces right now are often offering charging as an amenity. It's tough to hire people right now, right? So it becomes an amenity. You can offer it to your employees as an amenity, then charge anybody else that might want to come up. RFID cards, if they have an RFID, they're in your database, anything like that, you're able to, if you have the software that goes along with the hardware, you're able to use those RFID cards. Challenges would be if somebody sits there all day. Well, if you're concerned about that, you start charging after so long. They're going to move their car quick, right? You start charging them $3 an hour after they've sat there for 3 or 4 hours. They're going to come out and move their car quick so somebody else can jump on the charge. The options are kind of unlimited as far as if you have the software, the right software that goes along with the charger, to be able to charge, to offer it as an amenity, to offer it as free, send emails when they're charged up, all those types of things are kind of some of the things that you might want to look for when you're putting these in to your workplace, because it's important. I mean, electricity isn't free, right? And like you said with the government, it becomes one of those ideas that if you got to go to the gas station and pay for gas, kind of the same thing for your EV. A lot of workplaces, we're working with the hospital system right now. They actually had doctors running electrical cords out to their cars from inside the hospital to charge their EVs. So things like that become they not only become an amenity, they become a safety issue. So a lot of those questions arise, but more to the point, if you have the right software, you can pretty much do anything that you need to be able to do to offer that to your employees.
I think. So he answered that question. Yeah, so like you're 2 for 2 and not from me. So it's all good. Somebody had their hand up here. Okay. Well,
Oh, yeah, I just have a quick question, actually. Our organization was also looking at maybe installing some chargers as well. But I have heard that maintenance for these chargers, because we're looking to get maybe a company to come in and install charging stations, I don't know what you call it, like someone's got to pay for it. The word's exactly the same, it's very confusing. And we heard that maintenance was an issue for a lot of these things. Apparently, all these subsidies and stuff only really pay for installations, and the companies aren't really incentivized to maintain the chargers themselves. So that did kind of hold us back on ultimately making it, because in a month one of these things goes down and it takes 6 months to get it fixed. It was a total waste of money.
Somebody will come in, plug their car in, and they'll trip the breaker, and they don't say nothing. They just move the car to the next charger. And meanwhile, a guy comes in and the charger don't work. We got our electricity.
yeah. Yeah, we had a lot.
For sure.
Yeah, we had a lot of that going on too. You had your hand up. Well, the gentleman and then you, ma'am.
Just to go, so for our company, we bundle O&M in to anything that we install. So we cover, like full parts, labor, maintenance for a term of 5 years. But more to your point also with the incentives and rebates, there are a lot of incentives and rebates that also cover that O&M part of it, not just the installation. Like the national EV infrastructure bill covers installation and O&M when you install them, or up to a period of 5 years. So maybe, I just want to make sure if you're putting these in, make sure you have those conversations, because right now, those incentive and rebates, if you look for them, or you have a company that will look for them for you, you can get some of that stuff covered. And that O&M part of it, for a lot of you guys in the facilities, you don't want people picking up the phone and calling you all day about these chargers, and you gotta run out, basically, what's going on. So, that's something you gotta take into consideration.
Okay. So ma'am and then ma'am. All right.
Slightly different piece of revenue generation. Any considerations on the types of chargers that also include digital signage for advertising opportunities?
Yes. Like once you have and maybe you can weigh in on it, but like I know that we had branding put on some of our chargers. And it wasn't digital signage per se, but like if you have the box, I mean, that's a space for advertising, right? So, I don't, well, we've used it, but I don't see why you can't take it up a level and add digital signage. Ma'am, and then ma'am.
Similar to what the gentleman was saying, we're in the process of installing chargers as well, but we bundle everything in the package. And we're even actually getting paid. I'm in an industrial park, so they'll take care of maintenance. I think we just have to provide us a space where some of the parts will be held, but outside of that, all the calls, concerns, will go directly to the company, as well as we've allowed for some advertising, some of their signage. But so far, it's in our favor, so it's been working out. We'll just see what happens once everything is installed in that first.
Right. So, like, to that point, when you were getting your quotes or your pricing, did you get any alternates without the all-in? And if so, how did they compare?
Oh, we did, we
Well,
actually.
no, well, I was asking her.
You were asking for, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
She's right behind me, it looked like.
I'm sorry.
No, we did get some that did not include, so, I mean, we started to look at all the different categories, right? And we felt that if you're not gonna come in and take care of the maintenance, then you already extra yourself out of the game. For us, it wasn't we weren't bending on it, because we already had charges on the site. So we had understanding of some of the issues we were already having, with charges that weren't working, calling the company and they're telling us, oh, we no longer, have those parts, so we factored all that in when we set our customer proposal. And so those stores who weren't part of that didn't fit the criteria we didn't entertain.
Okay, thank you for that, sir.
Oh, I had the,
I'm looking, okay.
jeez.
Okay, good. All right, ma'am.
So I have two different companies that we use. At retail, we use one company that does have advertising on the side. But the one company that I use for a medical office building, it's really hard to get parts for. Our chargers were down for like 16 months, and we were waiting for support because of all the upgrades from 5G and 5G and everything. So yeah, so that was one issue that we definitely had with one of the companies, and I believe it is a level 2. But what we try to do, I manage mostly retail centers. What we try to do is get partnerships with the big box stores. So they're requesting it, and the money comes from them instead of us, the landlord slash owner, it coming out of our pocket.
Okay.
So, but there is a company that does do advertising on it.
All right, thank you for that. Did that help you, ma'am?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious about like successive advertising driving revenue. Yeah, we don't get any of the revenue. The company does. So, but we didn't pay for any installation either. It was a big box store, and all that revenue from the advertisement goes to the big box store and the company that installed it.
Thank you, sir. And then you, sir.
Federal government has mandated to go to social media for the federal government period. We have an issue where we sponsor the inspector to go out and check the railroads, and they're out in the woods, out in the we've had to compromise on those PHEVs instead of just EVs because of the distances and the inconvenience of being able to go to a charging station before you go out, because then that's time wasted or waiting, sitting, waiting to charge. Because they leave directly from their home going out to the field to do their work. One of the run into is getting charged in the first place. And the thought process was to charge them, have them charge them
What about solar or wind?
in order to do that. So, and the other thing is the vehicles that we need to use, such as, the majority of them, we're trying to go to, like Jeep Wrangler, for instance, in order to, because we need off-road vehicles to get to certain places, in order to get out and do it. So that dilemma is one of the issues that we've been working for, and we haven't figured it out.
So that's it's interesting that you say that because yesterday this happened, and I'm gonna do what my mom told me a long time ago. Like if you don't know, just say you don't know. I would say that like in areas where, and that's one of the considerations where you don't have electricity readily available, the thought would be to use other sustainable sources and kind of talk about it. I might show you the picture. Like they have like wind turbines that generate electricity to provide power to charging stations. They have solar panels that you can use, but like in the middle of nowhere, I really don't know like what exactly that looks like, but I could see leveraging other means of generating electricity to provide charging for remote areas. Does that make sense? And I see my lawyer nodding his head in the back, so.
I would consider sub-metering, because there's a lot of sub-metering options right now.
I understand some meters, and it's one of the thought processes. The only problem is that when you sell meters, that means the federal government got to pay for those meters from their own. We have over 200 some people out there in the field, because it's nationwide, to be paying extra for some meters. And then when you come out of the house, somebody got to pull that some of those back out of the house.
Well, okay. All right. So him, and then him.
He was talking about they're adding 120 volt convenience outlets, for people who can afford it. But what does that look like? I mean, how many charge hours, like how many miles you get for an hour charge? Like,
They get 4 miles an hour.
so they're still, even at 120 volt, we're getting 4 miles an hour charge. Well, in an 8-hour day, your car consists of, they can make.
I mean, my son-in-law is a medical physiologist. He drives his EV to the hospital. They have 110 volt. He's on a 12-hour shift. It makes sense for him.
That's what our client did,
He's had a car for 3 years. He's collected it almost 4 times.
All right.
I have a quick question. I know we're looking to go, reduce our carbon footprint, but why didn't we introduce hybrid vehicles before going to all electric? Going hybrid, it's a pretty aggressive goal when the United States doesn't have the infrastructure for everybody to have an EV station.
I have my personal opinion about that. I don't want to get in any political trouble. It's like Elon Musk. I think I'm not sure, but I will say that there's a big push to go. And then General Motors did have a suite of hybrid vehicles that they marketed. But I think with with the Teslas and then some of the other manufacturers that have come out, and then especially with the big push, as it's been said, to, like you said, to reduce our carbon footprint, manufacturers have just decided to go all in and go fast. We're actually in position, and it's been in the news, where we have to reduce structural costs to make room to fund electrification. So you probably seen in the news where people are getting laid off, and people are being separated from companies because one of the biggest structural costs is people, but because of how fast this needs to go, we need the funding and the money to fund electrification, and it's just a big arduous task right now. So my opinion is that it's just the spirit of competition, right? It would make sense if there was more of an iterative step, but I mean, yeah, but hybrids have been been around for a long time. You had your hand up, sir?
There are currently a couple of companies, there's at least one, that can install ACV chargers that do not require underground installation. They're movable, plug in 120 volt, and will upscale. How they do it, I'm not sure, but they upscale the electricity somehow. So it almost turns it not quite at level 2, but it's kind of like in between level 1 and level 2 charging for an EV car, but they're movable. They don't install underground. There's no boring, drenching needed. It's all above ground wiring. So if needed, they can be easily moved out, put in a different location. So stop by if you want to, where there's 21. I have to chat with you about that.
What's your booth number? 821. Yes, ma'am.
I'm at a K-12 private school, about 85 acres, 11 buildings, just to give you an idea. We're about to start a construction project for a $40 million new building, and wondering if we should plan at this time for something like this.
Yes.
We have about 1,400 students, and is there any loose formula for how many stations you plan for based on your size of your company or?
So the standards vary based on what location or locale you're in, and I provide a resource towards the end of it, but you would have to get with your local municipality to see what the parking, because what municipality is it?
We're in Georgia.
Georgia. There's a resource, because I only have 5 minutes anyway. And I appreciate everybody being a part of the panel today, by the way. Thank you so much. So I'll get to that. I'll get there. So operational implications, maintenance and repair, we talked about that. Chargers attract a lot of demand, especially during peak hours. Customer service, so like the charger breaks, like what do you do? How do you support them? And then infrastructure upgrades, to your point, ma'am. If you're in the middle of a construction project, you want to plan for charging, because to go back and do it after the fact is going to cost you way more money. So, yeah. Compatible renewable technologies currently available. On the left, you see a wind turbine used to power a charging station, and on the right, that just happens to be a Chevy Volt, a solar-powered EV charging station. But what if we leveraged other types of sustainable electricity generating sources like geothermal energy, hydropower, or biomass? So when designing and funding an effective charging network, we have to identify high demand areas. It's critical. Areas such as commercial and retail centers, et cetera, are likely to have a high demand for EV charging. We have to partner with stakeholders, such as local governments, utilities, and private companies to help fund an EVSE network. We talked about the idea that there's subsidies out there that can help fund your investment, and then governments, as well as utilities, could offer funding and incentives for the fact that you've installed EV infrastructure. And utilize smart charging technology. It allows for more efficient use of energy resources and can help reduce costs. And using that technology can optimize charging and minimize energy usage during peak hours. So you want to consider the different charging options. We talked about level 1, level 2, and DC fast to help to meet the needs of the different EV drivers. Continue to utilize data and analytics. Explore financing options. You can get grants, you can get loans, you can tax incentives, and then consider alternative revenue sources, fees, leasing fees, advertising opportunities can help fund your charging network and make it sustainable. When working with utility companies, depending upon where you are, you might have to engage with different or multiple utility companies. Make sure you have a clear line of communication with them, understanding what the requirements are as it pertains to connecting your chargers to the grid. These requirements include voltage and amperage specifications, metering, safety considerations, and then evaluating your grid capacity, right? Upgrading the EV, upgrading your infrastructure is probably more than likely going to require additional electrical capacity. So you can work with, there's an organization called NECA, the National Electrical Contractors Association, and they have specific certifications for individuals that can help you understand what your grid capacity are, and I include this as a resource towards the end. Develop a charging profile, consider demand response programs. You can actually negotiate rates if you're an owner, and then you want to establish a maintenance plan, right? Because as you install these things, more than likely they're going to break, and either you're going to have to repair them. Depending upon the charger that's in question, it's probably easier for you to just replace it. And then here's some resources to consider. You might want to take a picture of this slide because even though there's not one consistent standard across the industry, these are like some key resources that I found that help consolidate all of the different standards that exist across the globe. But to your question, ma'am, the Great Plains Institute has a document that summarizes all of the different standards from different municipalities and locales across the state, and leveraging that and working with your local municipality, it'll give you the rule of thumb that you're looking for in planning. I mentioned the National Electrical Contractors Association, and then you have this, which is affiliated with NECA, some standards that can be leveraged as you work to install your network. So we've had plenty of discussion. Are there any more questions? And I'm done. So I want to say thank you for being a part of my panel today.